Sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the sixth floor, casting geometric shadows across the polished wood floors of linear form interiors, one of the top interior design firms on the East Coast. But far from that brightness, the tech support room on the ground level felt like another world. Inside, Ava Monroe sat alone, her back against a supply cabinet lined with blueprint rolls. Her eyes were red. She tried not to make a sound, as if her sorrow might crack the silence too harshly. There was a soft knock. She startled. The door opened halfway, and a man stepped inside. Late 30s, maybe. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and he carried a tube of raw sketch paper. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't know anyone was in here." Ava quickly wiped her eyes. "It's all right. I was just taking a moment." He placed the tube down on the side table, then stood still for a beat, observing without judgment or intrusion. "This room is quiet," he said. "I like to hide here too when my head gets too loud." Ava let out a faint breath of something like laughter. "Which department are you from?" "Operations," he replied, "temporarily helping with logistics." He extended a hand. "Julian." "Ava," she answered, shaking his hand. "I handle 3D modeling downstairs." Their handshake was brief, ordinary, but beneath it lingered something quiet. Neither of them knew it yet, but this small moment was the beginning of something that would change everything. The next morning came heavy with grey light, the kind that seeps through blinds, but never really warms a room. Ava walked through the staff entrance early, avoiding the main lobby. She headed straight to her desk in the basement studio, where unfinished renderings waited like restless ghosts. She moved quietly, head down, until a familiar voice stopped her. "Morning," Julian said, standing near the corner workstation. Ava looked up, startled. He was already unpacking a box of fabric samples, organizing them with surprising care. "You are here early," she said. He shrugged. "Helps me think. Fewer people." She nodded slowly and stepped into the room. For a while they worked in silence. It was not awkward, just unspoken agreement. She appreciated that he did not ask questions, not yesterday, not now. But Julian was paying attention. He noticed how she winced slightly when her phone buzzed, how she rubbed her temples between tasks, how her screen stayed open on the same project for over an hour, unmoving. "You seem tired," he said softly, not prying, just observing. Ava paused. Then she said, "Some weeks are just heavier than others." Julian nodded. "Yeah, they are." She wanted to leave it there, but something in his tone, calm, unthreatening, opened a narrow door. "I lost someone," she said finally, eyes on her keyboard. "A few weeks ago." Julian looked at her but said nothing. "My older sister. Cancer. She was all I had left. And now—" Ava's voice broke off. He waited. "I have her son now. Luke. He's 7. She smiled faintly, but it was brittle. "He thinks she's just on a long trip. I haven't told him yet. I don't know how." Julian swallowed hard. "You're raising him alone?" Ava nodded. "It's not that I mind. I don't know how to be everything at once. Sister, guardian, parent, employee, strong." Julian leaned on the edge of the table, watching her. "You're already doing more than most." She didn't respond to that, just looked away and blinked back tears. "I feel like I'm pretending every hour of every day," she whispered. "Pretending to be okay. Pretending to keep it together so he can keep smiling." Julian's voice was low. "Maybe pretending is also a kind of strength." Ava looked at him for the first time that morning. Really looked. There was no pity in his face, only something quieter understanding, maybe even memory. And again, she did not know that the man sitting across from her held a secret, one that reached far deeper into her past than either of them could yet see. It had been over a week since Ava first cried in that quiet room, since Julian sat beside her and said nothing, but somehow made it easier to breathe. They did not talk about her sister again, but something had shifted. They passed each other in hallways, exchanged quiet nods in the copy room. Some evenings they stayed late in the same room without planning to working in companionable silence. He never asked anything personal, and she never explained her sadness. But Julian noticed things. How Ava always brought 2 lunches in a paper bag, one clearly packed for a child. How she rubbed her left wrist when anxious. How she never complained, never left early, but often looked like she had not slept. And Ava, though she would never admit it, noticed him too. He was different, not just polite or decent, but present. When he spoke, he looked her in the eye. When she spoke, he listened without waiting to reply. One evening, as she was sorting old materials in the basement archive, she found a storage box labeled 2013 Legacy Projects, covered in dust, nearly forgotten. She opened it out of habit. Inside were rolled blueprints, hand-drawn plans, fabric swatches, and a weathered folder marked Founding Year Concepts. Curiosity stirred. Most of the papers were technical sketches, but at the bottom beneath brittle vellum sheets, she found something unexpected, a small envelope. On it, in faded pen, from a stranger but not forgotten. Ava turned it over. Inside was a drawing, clearly a child's, of a tall man standing next to a girl and a woman, crayon-coloured with stars drawn all around the man's head. He had brown hair, a blue shirt, and oversized hands. At the bottom, "Thank you for helping us that night. Mum said you were the reason we got to start again." Ava stared. The handwriting looked vaguely familiar, but it was the woman's name, written at the bottom corner, that made her hands go still. Claire Monroe, her sister. She sat down heavily. Claire never spoke much about the years before she took Ava in, never about how they ended up in that small rented apartment in Tall Pines. Only once had she mentioned a stranger, a man who stopped on a snowy road and pulled them from a stalled car. Ava had been just a child. She barely remembered. But this drawing, this moment frozen in crayon, was proof that someone had been there. Someone who mattered more than Ava had known. She reached for her phone, hands trembling, and snapped a photo of the drawing. Something was stirring in her memory now. A hallway, cold air, a man wrapping a blanket around Claire's shoulders. A voice, gentle and calm. She had drawn this. She was the girl in the picture. And the man. Ava sat in the archive room long after the lights dimmed for the night. The drawing lay on the table in front of her, the crayons faded, but still clear enough. Her own childhood handwriting looked strange now, crooked round, filled with the confidence only children seem to have. She could not stop thinking about it. That night, the snow, the smell of gas, her sister's panicked breathing. Ava had forgotten most of it, but now the memories returned in fragments, like an old puzzle pulled from a dusty shelf. A man had stopped. He pulled open the frozen door, lifted her out first, then carried Claire over his shoulder. He brought them to a clinic, waited through the night. She had fallen asleep on a hallway bench, wrapped in a coat that was not hers. He gave her a chocolate bar. She had drawn the picture the next morning with broken crayons from the nurse's desk. Claire had encouraged it. "Say thank you the best way you know how," Claire had said. And she did. But she never saw the man again. Until now, maybe. Because Julian's face, the calm way he moved, the soft tone in his voice. She blinked hard. It could not be. It was impossible. Was it? The next day, Ava brought the drawing in a folder to the drafting room. Julian was already there, adjusting fabric colours under warm lighting. She hesitated at the door. He looked up and smiled. Hey. She walked in slowly. Can I show you something? He nodded. Of course. Ava sat opposite him and slid the folder across the table. Do you recognize this? Julian opened it carefully. The moment his eyes met the drawing, he stopped breathing. Crayon lines, a blue shirt, a gold star above the head, her childlike handwriting. He remembered. He had not seen that drawing in over 10 years. Julian leaned back slowly, holding the paper like it might crumble in his hands. His voice was almost a whisper. Where did you find this? My sister kept it. It was in an old box. She never mailed it, but she told me about you. Julian looked up, something unreadable in his eyes. I remember that night, he said. The snow. The two of you in the car. His voice cracked. Your sister, Claire. She was strong, hurt, but never let it show. Ava leaned forward. Why didn't you say anything? He looked down at the drawing again. Because I wasn't sure. Charles. You were just a little girl then, and I didn't want to assume. Or reopen something you didn't remember. But I did. Ava said quietly. Just now. It came back. A long silence settled between them. Then Julian added almost to himself. You thanked me once with this drawing. You called me a hero. He looked at her with quiet intensity. But I never got to say that it meant more than you'll ever know. That evening, after Ava left, Julian remained in the drafting room long after the lights dimmed. The drawing was still on the table, her childhood handwriting staring back at him. He remembered everything now. That winter night on the highway, the car half buried in snow, Claire's blood on his hands as he carried her from the wreck, the hospital that almost turned them away, his arguing at the reception desk. And then a small girl curled under his jacket, watching him with wide, silent eyes. He had told himself it was just a moment, that his part ended when he walked out of that hospital room. But he was wrong. The next morning, Julian opened a narrow wooden drawer in his office. Inside was a carefully folded note, aged and creased. A thank you letter Claire had written years ago, handed to him just before he left the hospital. He had kept it, along with the memory. He placed both the letter and Ava's drawing into a padded envelope. He walked through the hallways unnoticed, left the envelope gently on Ava's workstation, and walked away. Ava arrived early the next morning. She paused when she saw the envelope, her name handwritten across the front in clean block letters. She opened it slowly. Her drawing was inside, but now framed behind clear glass, its worn edges preserved. Beneath it, engraved into the mat, was a single line. You helped me believe again. Beneath the frame was Claire's old letter, now yellowing but intact. Ava opened it, her fingers shaking, to the stranger who stopped when no one else did. Thank you for not hesitating. Thank you for showing my sister that not all men walk away. Thank you for giving us one more beginning. Tears filled her eyes. She stood frozen beside her desk for a long time, holding the weight of 10 lost years and the proof that someone had carried them all along. That afternoon, Julian entered the staff kitchen to find Ava standing near the sink, holding the framed drawing close to her chest. When she looked up, he saw the shimmer in her eyes. I thought no one remembered that night, she said. I never forgot, Julian replied. She nodded silent for a moment. Then, You didn't just pull us out of a car. You gave my sister another 10 years of life. You gave me a home. You gave Luke everything. Julian shook his head gently. All I did was stop. No, Ava whispered. You stayed. Later that week, Ava brought Julian to a quiet hilltop cemetery on the edge of town. The wind rustled through the trees as they walked in silence, Ava holding a small bouquet of lavender and white daisies. They reached the gravestone near the back, modest and clean. Claire Monroe, beloved sister and mother. She never stopped giving. Ava knelt beside it, placing the flowers at the base. Julian stood behind her hands in his coat pockets, unsure if he should speak. But then a small voice broke the stillness. Is this where Mommy sleeps? Julian turned. A little boy stood behind them, no more than 7, with tousled dark hair and large, curious eyes. Ava opened her arms, and the boy. Luke ran to her side. She's not sleeping, sweetheart, Ava said gently. But this is where we come to talk to her. Luke nodded solemnly. He held a folded piece of paper in his hand. I drew her something. He crouched and laid the picture beside the flowers. A sun, a stick figure with long hair, a house with a red door. She'd like that, Ava whispered, brushing a hand over his hair. Julian crouched beside them. Can I see? Luke looked at him with open trust and nodded. Ava glanced sideways at Julian, watching the way he looked at the boy, not with pity or distance, but with something tender and quiet. She used to sing me a song, Luke said suddenly, before bed. Ava smiled faintly. I remember. Julian hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket. He handed Ava a small wooden box, smooth, unmarked. What is it? She asked. Open it. She did. Inside, a delicate melody played. Familiar. Woven with piano and soft humming. Claire's voice stitched into harmony. Ava gasped. I had an old voicemail recording, Julian said. From the hospital years ago. Your sister was humming in the background. I sent it to a composer friend. Ava closed the lid, holding the box close. I wanted Luke to have something for the nights that feel too quiet, Julian added. Ava looked at him, blinking through tears. You remembered the melody. I remember everything. They stood there for a while. Ava, Julian, and Luke in the soft wind, surrounded by wildflowers and silence. No more words needed. That night, back in her apartment, Ava placed the music box on Luke's nightstand. He lay curled under a blue blanket, eyes heavy. Do you think she hears us when we talk? He asked. I do, Ava said. Do you think she knows I drew her? She does. Do you think she likes him? He asked, pointing toward the door where Julian had just stepped out. Ava smiled gently. Yes, I think she does. 2 weeks later, Linear Form Interiors held a company-wide meeting in the central atrium. Staff from every department, from architects to maintenance workers, gathered in folding chairs, sipping coffee, waiting to hear why they had all been called. Ava sat near the back, Luke on her lap. It was a Saturday, and she had no childcare, but no one minded. Then Julian stepped forward. Not in khakis and rolled sleeves this time, but in a simple blazer and jeans. Still him, still calm. He took the microphone and cleared his throat. I started this company 12 years ago, he began, and I told myself we would never lose sight of the people behind the designs, the hearts behind the walls we build. He paused. But I did lose sight of it. Somewhere between expansion and deadlines, I forgot why I started this in the first place. A few in the crowd exchanged quiet looks. No one had ever heard the founder speak this way. Julian continued. Until recently, I met someone. She reminded me what this place was supposed to be. Not just efficient, not just profitable, but kind. His eyes found Ava in the back. Her name is Ava Monroe. Heads turned. She works in technical modeling, and 10 years ago her family gave me something I never forgot, a moment of trust and a crayon drawing I carried in my desk for a decade. A hush swept the room. Julian held up the drawing in its new frame. This was a thank you, a picture of a man with a gold star over his head. But today I want to say thank you to her for reminding me that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about listening and showing up. He set the microphone down and walked to her. Ava stood slowly, Luke holding her hand. Julian stopped in front of them, his voice soft, meant only for her. You once called me a hero, but the truth is, you and your sister saved me that night. You showed me what resilience looks like. He glanced at Luke. And now, if you'll let me, I'd like to stay, to help, to build something new, not just here, but with you. Ava's eyes filled not from shock, but from the strange peace that came with finally being seen. I don't need saving, she whispered. I know, he said. That's why I love you. She let the tears fall this time, and Luke, not fully understanding, just hugged her tighter. Julian reached for her hand, and in the quiet, surrounded by strangers, Ava nodded. Yes. That spring, Linear Form launched a new initiative, paid leave for single parents, grief support counseling, and a scholarship fund named after Claire Monroe. The drafting room was no longer just a place for silence. It became a space for connection, for healing. And Ava, who once whispered her fears into empty hallways, now stood in meetings with quiet confidence, one hand always warm in another's. She had not found a perfect life, but she had found something better. A heart rebuilt, a promise kept, and a man who never stopped remembering.